Welcome to Decluttering Your Org. I subtitled this one, Ugh, My Org is a Mess. This is our forward-looking statements. Make all your purchasing decisions on currently available features. My name is Christopher Marzilli. I'm a Platform Success Director here at Salesforce. I have about 14 years working on the platform, and I've literally worked on dozens upon dozens of re-implementations and refreshes, and I'm hoping to share some of my experience with you today. So the first thing you need to do when you start thinking about decluttering your org is be honest with yourself and kind of understand where you are with your org. If you have a new Salesforce implementation or you have a well-oiled machine that's achieving great ROI, you're probably not sitting in front of me right now. It's more likely that you're in a situation where you need some sort of re-implementation or at least some sort of preventative maintenance. So again, keeping with that theme of being honest with ourselves, which one looks more familiar to you? Do you have the one over here where it's a nice lightning UI and it's clean, or do you have the one where I can't even get the screenshot to fit nicely, where you have so many fields, your end users are like, I don't even know how to use this thing. So if you're on the other side, maybe you got to think about doing some decluttering. All right, so step one. In the decluttering process, assess your org. Review and determine the amount of technical debt that you have. Now, I just kind of used the term there, technical debt. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with it. It's actually a term that was invented by Ward Cunningham. It reflects and refers to the extra development work that it takes when you do something quickly but not scalably, right? So you build something quickly and it works for now, but it doesn't scale in the future, and you saddle yourself with technical debt. And like all debt, technical debt needs to be paid eventually, whether you do it incrementally over time or you do the one big balloon payment at the end where you have to basically re-implement your org. So, when you talk about technical debt, when Ward was talking about technical debt, he was really talking about code and development. But really, with Salesforce, technical debt is not just code. It's also configuration. Here are some very common areas of technical debt in Salesforce. These are by no means the full list of technical debt you could have in Salesforce. But I like to break them up into a couple different areas, talking about the quality of your org, the adoption, complexity, performance, limits, and even testing and training. Because as you can see, the top one is typically custom objects and fields. That's usually leads to a lot of adoption problems, a lot of complexity problems. But don't also discount, custom tabs and apps, page layouts and record types can also lead to a lot of complexity in your org. And then, of course, workflow rules, validation rules, installed packages, especially if they're not using them, can add to the technical debt of your org. Apex code and Visual Force code are, of course, part of the technical debt. I worked with a lot of companies who have built a lot of Apex and a lot of Visual Force that do things that we can now do natively on the platform. That is another big source of technical debt. Reports and dashboards. Many of you probably have orgs where you have thousands upon thousands of reports that nobody uses anymore. That's a massive amount of technical debt. And of course, roles and profiles can be very difficult to clean up and manage if you have hundreds of thousands of roles of profiles. I've worked with companies that have 50 users and 1,000 roles. It makes no sense, right? So these are some of the areas you need to think about when you think about technical debt. Now, how do we go about assessing our org's technical debt? Where do we start the process? Where do I start? So one of the good places is you can look at system setup and you can look at system overview, and it has a nice little graph. It shows some of the key figures. If you see any red on the system overview page, that's a good indication you might want to look there. If you're hitting data limits, because technical debt doesn't necessarily just have to be code and config. It could also be just extra data you have sitting around in your org that needs to be archived off. Schema Builder is actually not a bad place to go and look for your technical debt. You could use Schema Builder to look at the relationships between your objects and see if do you have a spidered mess of objects or do you have a nice clean schema. Also, if you see something in Schema Builder that's way out on one side and has no relation to any of your other data, that might be another indication that particular object is some technical debt that's maybe not being used anymore. Another place people don't think about, security health check is actually a good place to go to look for some technical debt and some features you might not be using, which also could be considered technical debt. Reports and dashboards are also a great way to get some technical debt information out of your org. You can run reports on reports to see the last time they've been run. If they haven't been run, if a report hasn't been run in a year, or maybe even 6 months, probably a good chance that you don't need that report anymore and you can delete it. You can also, there's also another tool, and this is a brand new tool that we released last year called Salesforce Optimizer. It literally is the technical debt tool for Salesforce. If you only remember one thing today in my session, remember that you should go and run this Salesforce Optimizer on your org. This is a free tool. All right, you can run it in production or in your sandbox. I recommend in your sandbox, but if you're a little skittish about running it, you can run it in your sandbox as well. It'll give you recommendations. It'll show you where some of your technical debt is, and it'll give you some recommendations. It'll show you what you're doing well and maybe where you need improvement. And to run it, all you have to do is go into Setup, type Optimizer in the search field, and then click I think it's 2 more clicks, and you'll run the optimizer. What will happen is in the background, maybe a few minutes or maybe an hour or so later, you'll get a PDF report that'll come to you. That's a detailed report of the technical debt in your org. And not only will it show you areas of technical debt, but it'll link out to recommendations and things you can do to address those issues. You'll be able to see org metrics, including field usage and limits. It'll also give you some prioritized insights, recommendations, and best practices. This is an incredible tool that was born out of a lot of work. And not only that, is when you get the email, the PDF will also get stored in your org in Chatter files. And you can run it on a regular basis. I actually recommend running it quarterly. That way you can track your performance as you go. And we're actually releasing the Salesforce Optimizer updates to that off cycle. So we're doing more than 3 releases a year in the optimizer, so we're improving it I think we're doing bi-monthly releases now, but we're improving it constantly. So if you're running it once a quarter, you can track how you're doing and get additional information that might not have been there the last time you ran it. Also, some other great tools that you can use is on the AppExchange. There's the toolkit for Salesforce, which is a great tool. They have one part of it is called Org Doctor, which does something similar of Optimizer, but will give you insights into some different metrics. Field Trip is another great tool. This is a great tool to analyze your org and specifically your custom fields and see how often they're being used. If you have lots of custom fields, chances are many of them aren't being used, and you could remove them from the system. And then if you just do a search for schema on the AppExchange, you're going to get a ton of results back. Metadata search, metadata glimpser, schema surfer. There's a lot of other tools out there that can help you address and review your metadata. There's also another tool called Org Dictionary, I'll talk about in just a second. But before I go into that, I want to talk about some other tools that we have for the Success Cloud. The Success Cloud is, of course, our customer success group. And if you're a Premier customer here at Salesforce, you have access to something called accelerators. If you're not a Premier customer, go talk to your AE about getting Premier. But once you're Premier, you have access to accelerators. These are short 2 to 6 week consulting engagements with our experts. They're specialists, and you get one-on-one personalization in these engagements. The biggest one is, of course, org health assessment. That's actually one that I work on a regular basis, where we actually we take the optimizer and we go even deeper into your org. And we look for areas of technical debt and give you personalized recommendations on how to address them. Also, another accelerator we have is the Code-Based Health Accelerator. This accelerator goes deep into your code. It'll do a static scan. It'll look for vulnerabilities. It'll look for best practice violations. And it'll also look at your page performance, specifically with Visualforce, but also with your Apex. We have a Service Cloud health assessment, which is similar to org health, except geared specifically to Service Cloud. Business process assessment, again, geared towards your business process, your workflows, your process builders. And then next month, we have an enterprise architecture assessment coming out. This is the org health assessment, except on steroids. We're not just going to confine it to your org. We're going to look at your entire enterprise architecture and your integrated apps. And then we also have about 20 plus more than Lightning accelerators. Why am I mentioning Lightning? Well, I'll talk about that in just a minute, but just know we have Lightning accelerators. And if you're also a Premier customer, you can get access to something called Premier Admin Services. This is 100 plus declarative change requests that you can do that our admins will do for you, including updating page layouts, updating reports, doing permission sets. So once you've identified your technical debt, you can leverage this team as an additional resource to help you start removing stuff and paring down your technical debt. All right. So a slide ago, I mentioned an app called Org Dictionary. Like I said, if you remember one thing today, remember to run the optimizer. If you remember 2 things, is that you need to create a data dictionary for your org. All right, and this is a place where you can document why a customization is in Salesforce. All right, this will help you kind of filter out where your technical debt is, why you have things, and then you should not just do it in this initial phase, but do it and keep it up to date with each release. You should be updating this every release. And the dictionary should basically include things like business purpose. Why is this here? Requester. Who requested it? That could be a person or a group, right? The data was created, which actually that's pretty easy to see in setup. But the data was last verified, so you should actually maybe once a year think about re-verifying that you need all of your customizations in Salesforce. and then the percentage of the time the field is used, all right? And this is information you can get out of tools like Field Trip. It can actually tell you how often a field is filled in. Rule of thumb here, if a field is used less than 15% of the time, you should consider removing it. You might even want to go higher, 20, 25%. It's up to you and how you feel you use your org. But anything that falls below that threshold, you should put that on a list. And you should circulate that list to your stakeholders and contemplate removing that from your org to relieve yourself of that technical debt. Right? Salesforce is an incredibly powerful platform, but it gives you a lot of rope to hang yourself. So you want to make sure that you put good governance around that, and the data dictionary is one way you can do that. All right, so now we've kind of done the assessment. We kind of know where we stand with the technical debt of our org. What do you do now? You have to define your corrective action. How are you going to pay down your org's technical debt? There's kind of two schools of thought here, depending on where you are. And that's a full reimplementation versus an ongoing maintenance strategy. Now, a reimplementation project usually consists of pausing new feature development, all right, doing a deep dive org analysis, you scope out what needs to be done, and then you reconfigure the org. In theory, leveraging clicks over code, leveraging the best parts of the platform before you go programmatic. Keep in mind that if this is something that you think you need to do, if your org's in a really bad state, we have our cloud services team and also many partners around the world that can help you with these projects. If you've never been through a reimplementation project, I definitely think it's a good idea to go out and seek help with that. Many of our partners and our cloud services teams have been doing these types of reimplementations for many years, and they can provide a lot of experience that you might not get otherwise. Now, a reimplementation project is sometimes very undesirable to the business. They don't like to hear that they're not going to get the features they want. And sometimes it can be also difficult to get some budget for something like that. So a lot of companies like to do what I call ongoing maintenance. It keeps the org moving forward while also cleaning up your mess. And the way you do this is you negotiate to get some sort of percentage of each release to pay down technical debt, right, and do cleanup work. I like to recommend something in the 10 to 20% range, but if your org's in a bad state, you might want to try to negotiate for 40 or 50% for a few releases to get you to a level state. And then after that, allocating 10% of each release to paying down technical debt makes a lot of sense because it won't allow your org to get all cluttered up again, right? And as you're adding new features to the platform, and as we add new features to the platform, you should think about deprecating old things that you no longer need. So for every 5 features that you add, there's probably something that you can deprecate off the org. And if you have that 10% of every release, it'll give you the opportunity to do that. Again, there's a lot of Apex and Visualforce out there in the world that was written before we had a lot of features, specifically in Lightning. So there's a big opportunity there to start deprecating some features that you probably built that are now native. So I've mentioned Lightning twice now, and I just want to say, you could leverage Lightning to help with your cleanup. And what do I mean by that is that Lightning gives you a chance to kind of rethink your entire user interface and how you're presenting it to the users. This is a great way of relieving yourself of technical debt. I repeat, do not do the work of migrating something over to Lightning if your users are not going to use it. That is a waste of time and money. All right, and I've been told there's something of the order of 200 million Visualforce pages out there in the world, but less than 10% of them are used on a regular basis. So that means there's only about 20 million Visualforce pages out there that are actually being used. So don't go converting every Visualforce page you have to Lightning. Find out the pages that are critical to your users and convert those. And by the way, our Lightning readiness check, which is kind of the sister of the Optimizer, can actually show you which Visualforce pages your end users are using. Now, you need to develop a project plan to go about your execution. This is a very standard project plan. You plan, you analyze, you design, you build, you validate, you deploy. It's very waterfall-ish. You might want to do it more agile. But some things to think about when it comes to decluttering your org. Make sure you have a sponsor and key stakeholders. Not unlike same as any other project, you need to have a sponsor for or technical debt pay down. Try to secure a budget. Make sure you do a communication plan if things are going to be changing. Specify what skills and resources you might need. Come up with your designs. Prioritize. Don't try to tackle all of your technical debt at once. Define some success KPIs. Typically, when you're talking about technical debt and paying it down, especially in the user interface, like custom fields, you can actually increase user productivity and adoptions. That's a key KPI when you think about technical debt projects. You might need some training. You also might need to do some blackout windows if you need to do some data migrations. And also, make sure you have allocated some time for post-deployment support. You're going to be changing things on end users. You might be taking things away from them that they might not be aware of. So make sure you have some time for post-deployment support. All right? And then once you start executing your plan, make sure you start working in a sandbox first. Don't try to start removing stuff from production. Ensure you do proper regressing testing. Again, you're removing stuff from the org. You want to make sure that you're not impacting critical business processes. Back up your data and your metadata before you make any changes. When you delete custom fields, you do have 15 days to restore them, but it's still a good idea to delete them first. And also keep in mind that removal of most types of metadata can't be done through change sets. If you're used to deploying your changes through change sets, you can't deploy a removal from change sets. The only way to do it from a point-and-click standpoint is to do it in setup and actually remove it from setup. If you're a developer and you use the metadata API, you can use something called the destructivechanges.xml file to remove metadata. But that's a developer function, not necessarily an admin function. And then also consider restricting access to a customization using profiles before you remove it. So if you have a custom field you're considering removing, don't just remove it. Use the profiles and remove the field. Use the field level security to remove your end user's access to that field. That way, if someone jumps up and down and comes running over to your desk with their hair on fire, saying, "Oh my God, my field is gone," all you got to do is go back in and update the profile. No harm, no foul. You don't have to re-add the field and then re-import the data from your backup. It's a really simple way to kind of see if someone's using something if you're unaware, and also it makes your life easier. I would usually think about setting like a time on that, like 30 to 60 days. You remove it from the profiles, give it 60 days. If nobody says anything, it's probably safe to delete at that point. If you're looking for some more help for some of our experts, there's a great blog post called Time to Clean Up Those Unneeded Salesforce Customizations. This goes through a really great 5-step process on how to address, and how to remove and decommission Salesforce customizations. Any customizations, fields, workflows, Apex classes, visual forces. This blog post covers it all. And notice that, it starts out with research, communicate, restrict access. Again, that's key. Then monitor that, make sure it doesn't change. By the way, you also got to be thinking about integrations, right? Not just users, but integrations. So if integrations work on a system admin, field level security won't necessarily prevent the integration from accessing it. So you need to monitor it. I like to monitor it using some reports. Basically, you run a report on the custom field, you download that report, 30 days later, you run the same report. If the data doesn't match up, somebody's been editing it. And then you can do your research and find out who's been changing that data. And then eventually you decommission your customization. Even more help. Role hierarchy is a little bit special kind of case when it comes to cleaning that up. This is a great blog post called Help My Role Hierarchy is a Mess. It goes into a detailed process and actually gives you a couple different options on how to address your role hierarchy. So again, this blog post I actually wrote, and it was born from that customer that I had 50 users and 1,000 roles. So it didn't make sense at all, and we came up with some different options for them to address their role hierarchy and how to clean it up. All right, even more help about what to do next. All right, so the next thing you're going to do, everybody's going to do this, right? As soon as they get home, is they're going to run the optimizer and start reviewing that report. All right, if you are a premier customer, you can schedule an org health. I would recommend doing that immediately. It is our most popular accelerator, which also means there's a little bit of a wait time for it, maybe a couple weeks. But definitely run it. This is going to go even deeper for you to get into different areas that the optimizer doesn't necessarily cover. And also, again, leverage Lightning. Lightning is a great opportunity to relieve yourself of technical debt that you no longer need. And now, and I don't know what my font here, but we now have a new service called Optimizer Rescue. And it was actually built for the optimizer. This is a service from our cloud services. It's an SOW engagement where once you've gone through the process of identifying your technical debt, you've done step 1, you've probably run the optimizer, maybe you've done the org health, you've done your research, you kind of know what you need to do. This Optimizer Rescue embeds an architect on your team for 5 weeks to help you execute on that, on the removal of your technical debt and any data or workflows you need to merge or fields you need to merge or data you need to back up. This is basically hands-on help for you as you go about your technical debt journey. So again, that's a SOW engagement. It's a 5-week engagement. If you need more, you can get more. But the basics of that is just a 5-week engagement. All right, so again, the 3 takeaways that you are going to do after this session, no matter what, is 1, run the Salesforce Optimizer. 2, create your data dictionary for your org, okay? You can use any tool you want. I'm very tool agnostic. If you want to use a spreadsheet, use a spreadsheet. You want to use org dictionary from the AppExchange, use org dictionary from the AppExchange. I don't really care how you do it, just do it. Get that org dictionary done, and then once you've finished decluttering, update it, and then keep it updated with every release. That should be part of your release process. As you add metadata and customizations to your org, you should be updating that org dictionary, all right? And then also, it's a great way to communicate to end users what fields are for. What's really funny is I've done the data dictionary for other customers, and what they've actually told me, they've come back months later and said, not only do we love this data dictionary, but now we use it for our onboarding process. So as they bring on new users to the platform, they give them the data dictionary, so that way they understand what all the fields are and how they're used. So it's a great training tool. And number 3, make sure you use Lightning as an opportunity to rethink and clean up your org. All right, that's all the time I have today, so thank you very much, and good luck on your decluttering project.